Good day. This is live to tape. We're about to start our live stream of Flow, and it's an interesting project I've been working on for a little bit. Just going out into nature, and you'll see what I'm talking about with the type of photography I've done for this. I'm going to be reading a couple of stories. We'll just go until I get tired. I'm gonna try to do like an hour and a half of a live stream starting from now. But it might be longer, might be shorter. So let's get started. So this is Flow from Life to Date. The first story is called The Boy and the Wolves. Once upon a time, an Indian hunter built himself a house in the middle of a great forest, far away from all his tribe, for his heart was gentle and kind, and he was weary of the treachery and cruel deeds of those who had been his friends. So he left them and took his wife and 3 children, and they journeyed until they found a spot near to a clear stream, where they began to cut down trees and to make them ready for the wigwam. Now, a wigwam is, you might know as a teepee, or it's the little hut, but it's curved. For many years they lived peacefully and happily in this sheltered place, never leaving it except to hunt wild animals, which served them both for food and clothes. At last, however, the strong man felt sick, and before long he knew that he must die. So he gathered his family around him and said the last words to them. "You, my wife, the companion of my days, will you follow me ere many moons have waned to the island of the blessed? But for you, my children, whose lives are newly begun, the wickedness and unkindness and the ingratitude from which I have fled are before you. Yet I shall go hence into peace, my children, if you will promise always to love each other and never forsake your youngest brother." "Never," they replied, holding out their hands, and then the hunter died content. Scarcely 8 moons had passed. Just as he had said, the wife went forth and followed her husband, but before leaving her children, she bade the 2 elder ones think of their promise to never to forsake the younger, for he was a child and weak. And while the snow lay thick upon the ground, they tended him and cherished him. But when the earth showed green again, the heart of the young man stirred within him, and he longed to see the wigwams of the village where his father's youth was spent. Therefore he opened all his heart to the sister, who answered, "My brother, I understand your longing for our fellow men, who we cannot see. But remember our father's words, we shall not seek our own pleasures and forget the little one." But he would not listen, and making no reply, he took his bow and arrow and left the hut. The snow fell and melted, yet he never returned, and at last the heart of the girl knew, cold and hard, that her little boy had become a burden in her eyes, till one day she spoke thus to him. "See, there is food for many days to come. Stay here within the shelter of the hut. I go to seek our brother, and when I have found him, I shall return hither." But when, after a hardening journey, she reached the village where her brother dwelt, and saw that he had a wife and was happy, and when she too was sought out by a young brave, then she also forgot the boy alone in the forest, and thought only of her husband. Now, as soon as the little boy had eaten all the food which his sister had left him, he went out into the woods and gathered berries and dug up roots. And while the sun shone, he was content and had his fill. But when the snow began and the wind howled, his stomach felt empty and his limbs cold, and he hid in trees all night, only crept out to eat what the wolves had left behind him. and by, having no other friends, he sought their company, and sat by. While they devoured their prey, they grew to know him, and gave him food, and without them he would have died in the snow. But at last the snow melted, and the ice upon the great lake, and the wolves went down the slope. And the wolves went down to the shore. The boy went after them. And it happened one day that his big brother was fishing in his canoe near the shore, and he heard the voice of a child singing in the Indian tone, my brother, I am becoming a wolf. I am becoming a wolf. And when he had so sung, he howled as the wolves howl. Then the heart of the elder sank, and he hastened toward him, crying, Brother, little brother, come to me. But he, being half a wolf, only continued his song, and the louder the elder called him, Brother, little brother, come to me. The swifter fled after his brother the wolves, and heavier grew his skin, till with a long howl he vanished into the depths of the forest. So with the shame and anguish in his soul, the elder brother went back to his village, and with his sister mourned the little boy and the broken promise to the end of his life. The next story is The Indian Who Lost His Wife. Once upon a time, there was a man and his wife who lived in the forest far from the rest of the tribe. Very often they spent the day hunting together, but after a while the wife found that she had so many things to do that she was obliged to stay at home, so he went alone. Though he found that when his wife was not with him, he never had any luck. One day he was away hunting, the woman fell ill, and in a few days she died. Her husband grieved bitterly and buried her in the house where she had passed her life. But as the time went on, he felt so lonely without her that he made a little wooden doll about her height, amid a size of company and dress in her clothes. He seated it in front of the fire and tried to think he had his wife back again. The next day he went out to hunt, and when he came home, the first thing he did was to go up to the doll and brush off some of the ashes from the fire which had fallen on its face. But he was very busy now, for he had to cook and mend, besides getting food, for there was no one to help him, and so a whole year passed away. At the end of that time he came back from hunting one night and found some wood by the door and a fire within. The next night there was not only wood and a fire, but a piece of meat in the kettle, nearly ready for eating. He searched all about to see who could have done this, but could find no one. The next time he went to hunt, he took care not to go far, and came in quite early. And while he was still a long way off, he saw a woman going into the house with wood on her shoulders, so he made haste and opened the door quickly, and instead of the wooden doll, his wife sat in front of the fire. She spoke to him and said, The Great Spirit felt sorry for you, because you could not be comforted. So he let me come back to you, but you must not stretch out your hand to touch me till we have seen the rest of our people. If you do, I shall die. So the man listened to her words, and the woman dwelt there, and brought the wood, and kindled the fire, till one day her husband said to her, It is now 2 years since you died. Let us now go back to our tribe. Then you will be well, and I can touch you. And with that he prepared food for the journey, a steering of deer flesh for her to carry, and one for himself. And so they started. Now the camp of the tribe was a distant 6-day journey, and when they were yet 1 day's journey off, it began to snow, and they were weary and longed for rest. Therefore they made a fire and cooked some food, and spread out their skins to sleep. Then the heart of the man was gently stirred, and he stretched out his arm to his wife, But she waved her hands and said, "We have seen no one yet. It is too soon." But he would not listen to her, and caught her to him. And behold, he was clasping the wooden doll. And when he saw it was the doll, he pushed it from him and his misery, and rushed away to the camp, and told them all his story. And some doubted, and they went back to him, and they went back with him to the place where he and his wife had stopped to rest. And there lay the doll, and beside they saw in the time, and besides they saw in time snow the steps of two people, and the foot of one like the foot of a doll, and the man, grieving sore all day, grieved sore all the days of his life. The next one is Punchkin. Once upon a time there was Raja who Once upon a time there was a Raja who had seven beautiful daughters. They were all good girls, but the youngest, named Balna, was more clever than the rest. Raja's wife died when they were quite little children, so these seven poor princesses were left with no mother to take care of them. The Raja's daughters took it in turns to cook for their father's dinner every day while he was absent, deliberating with his ministers on the affairs of the nation. About this time, the Prudhan died, leaving a widow and one daughter, and every day when the seven princesses were preparing their father's dinner, the Prudhan's widow and daughter would come and beg for a little fire from the hearth. Then Bala used to say to her sisters, "Send that woman away, send her away. Let her get the fire at her own house. What does she want with ours? If we allow her to come here, we shall suffer for it some day." But the other sisters would answer, "Be quiet, Bala. Why must you always be quarreling with this poor woman? Let her take some fire if she likes." Then the Prudhan's widow used to go to the heath and take a few sticks from it, while no one was looking. She would quickly throw some mud into the midst of the dishes which were being prepared for the Raja's dinner. Now the Raja was very fond of his daughters ever since their mother's death. They cooked his dinner with their own hands in order to avoid the dangers of being poisoned by his enemies. So when he found the mud mixed up in his dinner, he thought it must arise from their carelessness, as it did not seem very likely that anyone should have put mud on there on purpose. But being very kind, he did not like to reprove them for it, although the spoiling of the curry was repeated many days. At last one day he was determined to hide and watch his daughters cooking and see how it all happened. So he went into the next room and watched through a hole in the wall. There he saw his 7 daughters carefully washing the rice and preparing the curry, and as each dish was completed, they put it by the fire, ready to be cooked. Next he noticed the Prudhan's widow come to the door, beg for a few sticks from the fire to cook her dinner with. Bala turned to her angrily and said, "Why don't you keep fuel in your own house, and not come here every day and take ours, sister? Don't give this woman any more wood. Let her buy it for herself." Then the eldest sister answered, "Bala, let the poor woman take the wood and the fire. She does us no harm." But Bala replied, "If you let her come here so often, maybe she will do us some harm, and make us sorry for it some day." The Raja then saw Prudhan's widow go to the place where all his dinner was nicely prepared, for him. But when the widow came, she told him that she had played this trick because she wanted to gain an audience with him, and she spoke so cleverly and pleased him so well with her cunning words that instead of punishing her, the Raja married her and made her his Renee, and she and her daughter came to live in the palace. Now the new Renee hated the seven poor princesses and wanted to get them, if possible, out of the way, in order that her daughter might have all their riches and live in the palace and live in their palace instead of being grateful for their kindness to her. She did all she could to make them miserable. She gave them nothing but bread to eat, and very little of that, and very little water to drink. So these seven poor little princesses, who had been accustomed to having everything comfortable about them, and good food and good clothes, all their lives long, were very miserable and unhappy. And they used to go out every day and sit by their dead mother's tomb and cry and say, "Oh, mother, mother, cannot you see your poor children, how unhappy we are, and how we are starved by our cruel stepmother?" One day, while they were thus sobbing and crying, lo and behold, a beautiful pomelo tree grew up out of the grave, covered with fresh, ripe pomelos. And the children satisfied their hunger by eating some of the fruit. And every day after this, instead of trying to eat the bad dinner their stepmother provided for them, they used to go out to their mother's grave and eat the pomelos which grew there on the beautiful tree. Then Renee said to her daughters, "I cannot tell how it is. Every day those seven girls say they don't want any dinner, and won't eat any, and yet they never grow thin nor look ill. They look better than you do. I cannot tell how it is." And she bade her watch the seven princesses and see if anyone gave them anything to eat. So the next day, when the princesses went to their mother's grave and were eating the beautiful pomelos, the prince's daughter followed them and saw them gathering the fruit. Then Bala said to her sisters, "Do you not see that girl watching us? Let's drive her away, or hide the pomelos, or else she will go and tell her mother all about it, and that will be bad for us." But the other sisters said, "Oh no, do not be unkind, Bala. The girl would never be so cruel as to tell her mother. Let us rather invite her to come and have some of the fruit." And calling her to them, they gave her one of the pomelos. No sooner had she eaten it, however, than the prince's daughter went home and said to her mother, "I do not wonder the seven princesses will not eat the dinner you prepare for them, for by their mother's grave there grows a beautiful pomelo tree, and they go there every day and eat the pomelos. I ate one, and it was the nicest I ever tasted." The cruel Renee was much vexed at hearing this, and all the next day she stayed in her room and told Raja that she had a very bad headache. The Raja was very grieved and said to his wife, "What can I do for you?" She answered, "There is only one thing that will make my headache well. By your dead wife's tomb there grows a fine pomelo tree. You must bring me that here and boil it, root and branch, and put a little of the water in which it has been boiled on my forehead, and that will cure my headache." So the Raja sent his servants, and they had the beautiful pomelo tree pulled up by the roots and did as the Renee desired. And when some of the water in which it had been boiled was placed upon her forehead, she said her headache was gone and she felt quite well. The next day, when the seven princesses went, as usual, to the grave of their mother, the pomelo tree had disappeared. They all began to cry bitterly. Now there was by the Renee's tomb a small tank, and as they were crying, they saw the tank was filled with rich cream-like substance, which quickly hardened into a thick white cake. At seeing this, all the princesses grew very glad, and they ate some of the cake and liked it. And the next day, the same thing happened. I'm going to take a little break. My to go outside. And so it went on for many days. Every morning the princess went to their mother's grave and found the little tank filled with nourishing cream-like cake. Then the cruel stepmother said to her daughters, "How can I cannot tell how it is. I have had the palmero tree which used to grow by the Rene's grave destroyed, and yet the princesses grow no thinner, nor look more sad, though they never eat the dinner I give them. I cannot tell how it is." And her daughter said, "I will watch." The next day the princesses who were eating the cream cake, who should come by but their stepmother's The next day while the princesses were eating their cream cake, who should come by but their stepmother's daughter. Balna saw her first, and said, "See, sisters, there comes that girl again. Let us sit around the edge of the tank, and not allow her to see, for, for if we give her some cake, she will go and tell her mother, and it will be very unfortunate for us." Here comes my dog. She's trying to sneak around. The other sisters, however, thought Balna unnecessarily suspicious, and instead of following her advice, they gave the Bruin's daughter some of the cake, and she went home and told her mother all about it. The Rene, on hearing how well the princess fared, was exceedingly angry, and sent her servants to pull down the dead Rene's tomb, and fill the little tank with the ruins, and not content with this, she the next day pretended to be very ill, in fact, at the point of death, and when the Rajah was much grieved, he asked her whether it was in his powers to procure her any remedy. She said to him, "Only one thing can save my life, but I know you will not do it." He replied, "Yes, whatever it is, I will do it." She then said, "To save my life, you must kill the 7 daughters of your first wife, and put some of their blood on my forehead and on the palms of my hands, and their death will be my life." At the words the Rajah was very sorrowful, but because he feared to break his word, he went out with a heavy heart to find his daughters. He found them crying by the ruins of their grandmother's grave. Then, feeling he could not kill them, the Rajah spoke kindly to them, and told them to come into the jungle with him. And there he made a fire, and cooked some rice, and gave it to them. But in the afternoon, it being very hot, the 7 princesses all fell asleep, and when they were fast asleep, the Rajah, their father, stole away and left them, for he feared his wife, saying to himself, "It is better my poor daughters should die here than being killed by their stepmother." He then shot a deer and returned home, put some of its blood on the forehead and hands of the Rene, and she thought then that he had really killed the princesses, and she said she felt quite well. Meantime, the 7 princesses awoke, and they found themselves alone in the thick jungle. They were very much frightened, and began to call out as loud as they could, in the hopes of making their father hear. But he was by that time far away, and would not have been able to hear them, even had their voices been as loud as thunder. It so happened that this very day the 7 young sons of the neighboring Rajah chanced to be hunting in that same jungle, and they were returning home after the day's sport was over. The youngest prince said to his brother, "Stop, I think I hear someone crying and calling out. Do you not hear voices? Let us go in the direction of the sound and find out what it is. So the 7 princesses rode through the woods until they came to the place where the 7 princesses sat crying and wringing their hands. At the sight of them, the young princes were very much astonished, and still more on learning their story. And they settled that each should take one of these poor forlorn ladies home with him and marry her. So the first eldest prince took the eldest princess home with him and married her. The second took the second, the third the third, and fourth took the fourth, the fifth took the fifth, and the sixth took the sixth, and the seventh, and the handsomest of all, took the most beautiful Bala. And then they got to their own land, and there was a great rejoicing throughout the kingdom at the marriage of the 7 young princes to the 7 much beautiful princesses. About a year after, the Bala had a little son, and his uncle and aunts were so fond of the boy that it was as if he had 7 fathers and 7 mothers. I lost my spot. Do, do, do. About a year after this, Bala had a little son, and his uncles and aunts were so fond of the boy that it was as if he had 7 fathers and 7 mothers. None of the other princes and princesses had any children, so the son of the 7th prince and Bala was acknowledged their heir by all the rest. They had thus lived very happily for some time, when one fine day the 7th prince, Bala's husband, said he would go out hunting, and away he went, and they all waited along for him. But he never came back. Then his 6 brothers said they would go out and see what had become of him, and they went away, but they also did not return. And the 7 princesses grieved very much, for they feared that their kind husbands must have all been killed. One day, not long after this had happened, as Bala was rocking her baby's cradle, and while her sisters were working in the room below, there came to the palace door a man in a long black dress who said that he was Farkin, and came to beg. The servants said to him, "You cannot go into the palace of Raja's sons. You cannot go into the palace. The Raja's sons have all gone away. We think they must be dead, and their widows cannot be interrupted by your begging." But he said, "I am a holy man. You must let me in." Then the stupid servants let him walk through the palace, but they did not know that this was no Farkin. It was a wicked magician named Pushkin. Punchkin Farkin wandered through the palace and saw many beautiful things there, till at last he reached the room where Bala sat, singing beside her little boy's cradle. The magician thought her more beautiful than all the other beautiful things he had seen, insomuch that he asked her to go home with him and to marry him. But she said, "My husband, I fear, is dead, but my little boy is still quite young. I will stay here and teach him to grow up a clever man, and when he is grown up, he shall go out into the world and try to learn the tidings of his father. Heaven forbid that I should ever leave him, or marry Jan." At these words, the magician was very angry, and turned her into a little black dog, and led her away, saying, "Since Jan will not come with me of your own free will, I will make you." So the poor princess I will make you. So the poor princess was dragged away without any power of effecting or escape, or letting her sisters know what had become of her. As Punchkin passed through the palace gate, the servants said to him, "Where did you get that pretty little dog?" And he answered, One of the princesses gave it to me as a present. At hearing which, they let him go without further questioning. Soon after this, the six elder princesses heard the little baby, their nephew, begin to cry, and when they went upstairs, they were so surprised to find him all alone, and Bala nowhere to be seen. Then they questioned the servants, and when they learned of the falcon and the little black dog, they guessed what had happened. They sent in every direction seeking them, but neither the falcon nor the dog were to be found. What could six poor women do? They gave up all hopes of ever seeing their kind husband and their sister and her husband again, and devoted themselves henceforth to teaching and taking care of their little nephew. Thus time went on, till Bana's son was 14 years old. Then one day his aunts told him the history of the family, and no sooner did he hear it than he seized the great desire to go in search of his father and mother and uncles, and if he could, find them alive and bring them home again. I'm going to take a short break. I'll be right back. Okay, I returned. Trying to find my spot. Okay. And thus time went on, till Baha's son was 14 years old. Then one day his aunts told him the history of their family, and no sooner did he hear it than he was seized with a great desire to go in search of his father and mother and uncles. And if he could find them alive, to bring them home again. His aunts, on learning his determination, were much alarmed. They tried to dissuade him, saying, We have lost our husbands and our sister and her husband, and you are now our sole hope. If you go away, what shall we do? But he replied, I pray you will not be discouraged. I will return soon, and if it is possible to bring my father and mother and uncles with me. So he set out on his travels, but before but for several months but for some months he learned nothing to help him in his search. At last, after he had journeyed many hundreds of weary miles and became almost hopeless of ever hearing anything furthering his parents, anything further of his parents, he one day came to a country that seemed full of stones and rocks and trees, and there he saw a large palace with a tower. Hard by was a little house, Mali's little house. As he went looking about, the Mali's wife saw him and ran out of the house and said, "My dear boy, who are you that dare venture into this dangerous place?" He answered, "I am Raja's son. I come in search of my father, my uncles, and my mother, whom a wicked enchanter bewitched." Then Mali's wife said, This country and palace belong to a great enchanter. He is all-powerful, and if anyone displeases him, he can turn them into rocks, stones, and trees. All the rocks and trees you see here were living people once. The magician turned them all into what they are now. Some time ago, Raja's son came here, and shortly afterward came his 6 brothers, and they were all turned into stones and trees. And these are not only the unfortunate ones, for up in that tower lives the beautiful princess, whom the magician has kept prisoner there for 12 years, because she hates him and will not marry him. Then the little prince thought, "These must be my parents and my uncles. Now I have found what I seek at last." So he told his story to the Mali's wife and begged her to help him to remain in the place. So he told his story to the Mali's wife and begged her to help him remain in that place a while and inquire further concerning the unhappy people she mentioned, and she promised to befriend him and advise his disguising himself. At least the magician should see him, and turn himself into a stone. To this the prince agreed, so the Mali's wife dressed him up in a sari and pretended that he was her daughter. One day, not long after this, the magician was walking in his garden and saw the little girl, as he thought, playing about, and asked her who she was. She told him that she was the Mali's daughter, and the magician said, "You are a pretty little girl, and tomorrow you shall take a present of flowers from me to the beautiful lady who lives in the tower." The young prince was much delighted at hearing this, and went immediately to inform the Mali's wife. After consultation with whom he determined that it would be more safe for him to retain his disguise, and trust to the chance of favorable opportunity for establishing some communication with his mother, if it were indeed she. Now it happened that at Bala's marriage her husband had given her a small gold ring on which her name was engraved, and she had put it on her little son's finger when he was a baby, and afterwards, when he was older, his aunts had it enlarged for him so that he was able to wear it. The Mali's wife advised him to fasten the well-known treasure to one of the bouquets and present it to his mother, and trust her recognizing it. This was not to be done without difficulty, as such a strict watch was kept over the poor princess for fear of her ever establishing communication with her friends, that though the supposed Mali's daughter was permitted to take her flowers every day, the magician or one of his slaves was always in the room at the time. At last one day, however, the opportunity favored him, and when no one was looking, the boy tied the ring to the nosegai and threw it at the Bala's feet. It fell with a clang on the floor, and Bala, looking to see what made the strange sound, found the little ring tied to the flowers. On recognizing it, she at once believed the story her son told her of his long search, and begged him to advise. On recognizing it, she at once believed the story her son told her of his long journey, and begged him to advise her as to what to do, as what she had better do. At the same time, entreating him on no account to endanger his life by trying to rescue her. She told him that for 12 long years the magician had kept her shut up in the tower because she refused to marry him, and she was so closely guarded that she saw no hope of release. Now Bala's son was a bright, clever boy, so he said, "Do not fear, dear mother. The first thing to do is to discover how far the magician's power extends, in order that we may be able to liberate my father and uncles, whom he has imprisoned in the form of rocks and trees. You have spoken to him angrily for 12 long years. Now rather speak kindly. Tell him you have given up all hopes of ever again seeing the husband you have so long mourned, and say that you are willing to marry him. Then endeavor to find out what his power consists in, and whether he is immortal or can be put to death." Bala determined to take her son's advice, and the next day sent for Punchkin, and spoke to him as had been suggested. The magician, greatly delighted, begged her to allow the wedding to take place as soon as possible, but she told him that before she married him, he must allow her a little more time, in which she might take his acquaintance, and that, after being enemies so long, their friendship could be strengthened by degrees. "And do tell me," she said, "are you quite immortal? Can death never touch you? And are you too great an enchanter ever to feel human suffering?" "Why do you ask?" said he. "Because," she replied, "if I am to be your wife, I would like to fain know all about you, in order, if any calamity threatens you, to overcome, or, if possible, to avert it. It is true," he added, "that I am not as the others. Far, far away, hundreds and thousands of miles from this, lies a desolate country, covered with a thick jungle. In the midst of the jungle grows a circle of palm trees, and in the center of the circle stand 6 chalets full of water, piled one above the other. Below the sixth chalet is a small cage that contains a little green parrot. On the life of this parrot depends my life. If the parrot is killed, I must die. It is, however," he added, "impossible that the parrot should sustain any injury, both on the account of the inaccessibility of the country, and because by my appointment many thousand genii surround the palm trees, and kill all who approach the place." Bala told her son what Punchkin said, but at the same time implored him to give up the idea of getting the parrot. The prince, however, replied, "Mother, unless I can get a hold of that parrot, you and my father and uncles cannot be liberated. Be not afraid, I will shortly return. Do you, meantime, keep the magician in good humor, still putting off your marriage with him on various pretexts, and before he finds out the cause of delay, I will be here." So saying, he went away. Many, many weary miles did he travel, till at last he came to the thick jungle, and being very tired, sat down under a tree and fell asleep. He was awakened by a soft rustling sound, and looking about, he saw a large serpent, which was making its way at an eagle's nest built in the tree under which he lay, and in the nest there were 2 young eagles. The prince, seeing the danger of the young birds, drew his sword and killed the serpent. At the same moment a rushing sound was heard in the air, and the 2 old eagles, which had been out hunting for food for the young ones, returned. They quickly saw the dead serpent and the young prince standing over it, and the old mother eagle said to him, "Dear boy, for many years all our young ones have been devoured by that cruel serpent. You have now saved the lives of our children. Whenever you are in need, therefore, send to us, and we will help you. And as for those little eagles, take them, and let them be your servants." At this the prince was very glad, and the two eagles crossed their wings, on which he mounted, and carried him off far, far away, over the thick jungles, until they came to the place where grew the circle of palm trees, in the midst of which stood the six chateaux of water, filled full of water. It was the middle of the day, and the heat was very great. All around the trees were the genies fast asleep. Nevertheless, they were such countless thousands of them that it would have been quite impossible for anyone to walk through their ranks to the place. Down swooped the strong-winged eaglets. Down jumped the prince. In an instant, he had overthrown the six chateaux of water and seized the little green parrot, which he rolled up in his cloak, while as he mounted again the air, all the genies below awoke, and finding their treasure gone, set up a wild and melancholy howl. Away, away flew the little eagles, till they came to their home in the great tree. Then the prince said to the old eagles, "Take back your little ones. They have done me good service. If I ever again stand in need of help, I will not fail to come to you." He then continued his journey on foot till he arrived once more at the magician's palace, where he sat down at the door and began playing with the parrot. Punchkin saw him and came to him quickly and said, "My little boy, where did you get that parrot? Give it to me, I pray you." But the prince answered, "Oh no, I cannot give away my parrot. It is a great pet of mine. I have had it many years." Then the magician said, "If it is an old favorite, I can understand your not caring to give it away. But come, what will you sell for it?" "Sir," said the prince, "I will not sell my parrot." Then Punchkin got frightened and said, "Anything, anything, name what price you will, and it shall be yours." The prince answered, "Let the 7 Rajas' sons, whom you turned into rocks and trees, be instantly liberated." "It is done, as you desire," said the magician. "Only give me my parrot." And with that, by the stroke of his wand, Bala's husband and his brothers resumed their natural shapes. "Now give me my parrot," repeated Punchkin. "Not so fast, my master," rejoined the prince. "I must first beg that you restore to life all you have thus imprisoned." The magician immediately waved his wand again, and whilst he cried in an imploring voice, "Give me my parrot," the whole garden became suddenly alive. Where rocks and stones and trees had been before, stood Rajas, punts, and sirdars, and mighty men on prancing horses, and jeweled pages, and troops of armed attendants. "Give me my parrot," cried the Punchkin. Then the boy took hold of the parrot and tore off one of its wings, and as he did, the magician's right arm fell off. Punchkin then stretched out his left arm, crying, "Give me my parrot." The prince pulled off the parrot's second wing, and the magician's left arm tumbled off. "Give me my parrot," cried he, and fell on his knees. The prince pulled off the parrot's right leg, and the magician's right leg fell off. The prince pulled off the parrot's left leg, and down fell the magician's left, nothing remaining of him save the limbless body and the head. But still he rolled his eyes and cried, "Give me my parrot." "Take your parrot," then cried the boy, and with that wrung the bird's neck and threw it at the magician. And as he did so, Punchkin's head twisted around, and the fearful groan, he died. Then they let Bala out of the tower, and she, her son, and the 7 princes went to their own country, and lived happily ever afterward. And as to the rest of the world, everyone went to his own house. so this is going to be our last story. How the sun, moon, and wind went out to dinner. One day, sun, moon, and wind went out to dine with their uncle and aunt Thunder and Lightning. Their mother, one of the most distant stars you will see up in the sky, waited alone for her children to return. Now both sun and wind were greedy and selfish. They enjoyed the great feast that had been prepared for them, without any thought of saving any of it to take home to their mother. But the gentle moon did not forget her. Of every dainty dish that was brought round, she placed a small portion under one of the beautiful long fingernails that the star might also have shared in the treat. On their return, their mother, who had kept watch for them all night long with her little bright eye, said, "Well, children, what have you brought home for me?" The son, who was the eldest, said, "I have brought nothing home for you. I went out to enjoy myself with my friends, not to fetch dinner for my mother." And the wind said, "Neither have I brought anything home for you, mother. You could hardly expect me to bring a collection of good things for you when I merely went out on my own pleasure." But the moon said, "Mother, I fetch a plate. See what I have brought you." And shaking her hands, she showed down such choice a dinner as never was seen before. Then Star turned to the sun and spoke thus, "Because you went to amuse yourself with your friends, and feast and enjoyed yourself without any thought of your mother at home, you shall be cursed. Henceforth your rays shall ever be hot and scorching, and shall burn all that they touch, and men shall hate you and cover up their heads when you appear. And that is why the sun is so hot to this day." Then she turned to the wind and said, You also who forgot your mother in the midst of your selfish pleasure, hear your doom. You shall always blow in the hot, dry weather, and shall parch and shrivel all living things. All men shall detest and avoid you from this very time. And that is why the wind in the hot weather is still so disagreeable. But the moon, she said, "Daughter, because you remembered your mother and kept for her a share in your own enjoyment, from henceforth you shall be ever cool and calm and bright. No noxious glare shall accompany your pure rays, and men shall always call you blessed." And that is why the moon's light is so soft and cool and beautiful even to this day. So that was the first episode of Flow. I want to thank everyone for coming out. I will be doing this Wednesday. Tomorrow we're going to be playing Mass Effect Andromeda. It's going to be our third Let's Play. We're getting along in that. And then should do another creative stream, ASMR stream, Friday. And then Thursday is also another video game live stream, so I'll be playing more Mass Effect then. So I want to thank everyone for coming out. I'm going to be doing more ASMR and reading streams. We're kind of in a funny place because I have to do the test renders for the Milwaukee project, so that's going to be rendering on a different computer. So we don't have that much to do video editing or photo editing until the first test renders come out. So I want to thank everyone for coming by, and I'll see you tomorrow sometime between 9 and 11 p.m. Eastern Time, and we'll be playing Mass Effect Andromeda. Thanks for coming by. See everyone tomorrow. Bye-bye.